Yeah.
Amazing.
We'll share out
No
the slides
pressure.
afterwards.
All right, we on. So excited.
Cool.
Cool.
All right, shall we start then?
Sure thing.
Okay. Well, so this morning and slash evening, if you're Irfan, we're going to be talking about accessibility in tech. So Two pushed us to do this or pushed me to do this, and I was really excited because I love accessibility and I talk about it all the time. And then Danny was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm super excited!" So we decided to kind of partner up on this and go over some what we think is really important in accessibility, especially as it relates to design and research and tech and all that. So I'm gonna go to the next slide. So just introductions are because we're going to have a couple new people like Irfan joining, so we'll kind of skip that. But really today what we want to do is focus on like building empathy for accessibility and learning a little bit more about what it means to be disabled and how that affects how you interact with the web and with apps. And so we'll talk a little bit about how to build empathy, the different types of disabilities, and then some research and design tools that we can use to be better as designers. And then we have a whole bunch of extra resources to share out afterwards too. So to kind of kick it off, would love to have a discussion with everyone about what have you all done thus far to include accessibility practices in your research or design work?
Anyone wants to start?
Yeah, I'll say as recently as like this week, I got an extension for Figma that like allows you to select a frame and it'll give you the AA and AAA color, basically a color accessibility rating for it. But beyond that, like not much in application, only in research.
Yeah, and so depending on the type of product. So for example, when we were working on a knitting application, just to give an example, right? Like we're trying to modernize knitting, and we try to create an app that would guide the users and beginners and expert alike through a pattern. And I think the question was, should we have voice in addition to text or vice versa? And whether including voice is a weird thing, whether including voice would aid the people with vision impairment or help the impaired, or I guess not helping the people with hearing impairment, right? But then we decided that because the app is very visual, we would include text instruction in addition to visual cues to guide them versus using voice.
Oh, very cool. So you're hitting kind of multiple different ways of both visual and auditory methods of communicating.
I mean, I guess in that instant, we made the assumption that if they can't see what we're showing them, then the app is useless anyway. So we double down on the visual aspect. But I would love for us to keep going and, implement audio as an additional method.
That's really interesting. Well, hopefully we'll give you some tools on that because I think we've got some like interesting information that might help in that case, especially.
Awesome.
Cool. What about you, Irfan? Is there anything that you do in your design to include accessibility? And you're on mute if you're trying to add. All right. Well, that's cool. We can go on. So for me, it's really important to like develop empathy for what we're talking about and for like the users that we're working with. And this is, I found this really hard when I started working with people who are disabled or like thinking about people who are disabled. Coming from my time at the University of Michigan, we did a lot of like social justice and education work. And one of the biggest challenges at the start of anything, any type of like learning about people who are different from yourself is we've often been conditioned to overlook or like not notice or not make a big deal about differences between us because there's like a whole train of thought that, you know, we should just acknowledge that we're all human and forget that some of these differences exist. But by doing so, we neglect the pieces that make us unique or make us interact with the world differently. So to start with today, we're going to really focus on building our awareness of disability and different types of disabilities and how they interact with the web, so that we can make ourselves more aware, since we've been trained really aggressively by society to not notice and not look into that. So we're going to try to like not compartmentalize. We can't really ignore these things, so we really need to like pull them out and make them really apparent. So that's what we're going to attempt to do today. And I'm going to start out with some big numbers to like make it like help us understand the gravity. And I think this will also help when we're talking to clients who don't understand the purpose.
That's crazy.
Yeah, 1 in 7. That's 15% of the world's population has a disability. That's super widespread. And a lot of people just don't seem to realize like how important that is. Yeah, you can go ahead. And then in the world, there are 2.2 billion people that have a vision impairment. And of that, like 1 in 12 men have some form of color blindness.
Wow.
Yeah. So doing those color contrasts and color comparisons are really important. And we have like 466 million people have a hearing loss disability. And if we go to the next slide, we are at extreme risk of developing hearing loss. A very large portion of our population who isn't already disabled could become and will become disabled. Specifically in the area of hearing loss. So
all those heavy metal.
Heavy metal, having earbuds for like the first time, like our generation grew up with like, I wore headphones on the bus from the time I was in 5th grade and like blasted music all the way to school. And, you know, things like that has severely changed our health outcomes when it comes to hearing loss. And then if we can jump to, yeah. So all of this to say, any one of us can become disabled at any time. And I think that's something that is often overlooked, or because we spend so much time ignoring disability, we don't realize that disability can happen to those of us who feel that we are able-bodied. In a perfect world, most of that disability would come just from aging, and our population lives longer than usual. So we are, or like longer than the human body was ever intended to. So we experience more disabilities as we grow older. We experience an increase in chronic health conditions, and that's just normal aging. That this completely discounts being in an accident or having some other sort of genetic disorder you didn't know about, or health issues caused by the environment. There's a whole lot of things that can cause disability for us over time. So all of these numbers that I've shown can increase dramatically because of a snowstorm in Texas. Like it can increase dramatically from freak accidents that we have nothing that you couldn't have anticipated. It's important to remember that when we think about like thinking about the websites that you use most often, or the video games you like to play, or the books that you like to read, whatever you do for your hobbies. If something were to happen to you later today or tomorrow, would you still be able to interact with your favorite thing to do? And that's kind of the lens that we want to think about when we're going into design and research of, I'm designing this website, would even I be able to use it if I lost the use of my hand or my eyes or my ears? To like really make it salient to us that our ability to interact in the world is temporary and that disability is coming for us. But
that's
just
the somber thought.
It is. It really is. But it also is like, it's, I don't know, it's like you can't change your race. Your gender is kind of confusing. You can sort of change your religion, but disability can happen in any person's life and can impact you in ways you never anticipated, prepared for, expected. And so as designers, if we can make that transition easier for selfishly for ourselves, but also caringly for the people around us and the people we want to use our services, like we should try. We should do the best we can to try. So now that I've hopefully scared you, like the goal is to scare you a little bit, to be honest. I want you to be afraid, because I think that will help us remember. But kind of, yeah, that's what I want to do in terms of like helping us develop empathy, is like understand it's real and can happen to us. And I would love for Danni to go into a little bit more detail about what could happen.
Point taken. Great.
Yes, and going off of that, I want to add that disabilities, there's a stigma around the word disabled. It seems like it's always intense, but it can be from something that's like, you might have arthritis in like your one pinky knuckle, or you could be blind. Like there's a scale, not to dismiss or not like to like take away from the disability of the smaller ones, but they do exist. Speaking of which, we're going to jump into different like categories, I want to say, for different disabilities. So visual disabilities, as you might recall from one of the previous slides, is very, very common. And I know at least 2 of us right now are wearing glasses. So that's already a disability, where we have like poor weakening vision. Some people are completely blind. Some people can see lights and shadows. And then this can even stem into dyslexia and dysgraphia if you're looking at it from like a high level that's pretty visual. And that can impact how you read like your emails to a book, or read your bill, you know? So, and then it can also go into color blindness as well, like we talked about, and astigmatism, which I've learned recently actually does impact vision. It can impact how light is received in your eye because of the shape of your eye. It impacts the shape of your eye. So instead of seeing like a haze around a light bulb, some people see like that streak of that light. And then we also have a small list of auditory disabilities, and it seems small, but it's because the hearing loss is an even like bigger scale. So you can have like partial hearing loss in one ear, tinnitus, which is the constant ringing in your ear, and that can be loud. My dad actually has tinnitus, and I remember one time asking him to turn the radio down because it was a little loud, and he was like, I can't hear it. And he was like, he turned the volume up more, and he was like, he's like, my ringing is louder than this. And that really resonated with me, or maybe not resonated, but like it really sat with me, and it made me realize how like strong that can be. Mm-hmm. And then there's also cognitive disabilities and disorders. And before I go into this, I want to say that the other disabilities, and even ones on this list, can lead to other ones on this list that I'm showing you right now. Like tinnitus, just because we're on the topic, has a big link to depression and anxiety, because it's annoying. It doesn't turn off. So that can lead to frustration, anger, like anxiety, like I said, and it has led to eye muscle disabilities. I don't know if you've like know about this, but some people's eyes will shake, and that can impact vision. And then Tourette's again, paralysis, obviously. It's a long list, and it goes all the way to Meniere's disease and Parkinson's disease. This goes from not being able to move a joint or at all to maybe not being able to control how you move. And then we have the list of temporary disabilities. And something that also sits with me is I went to a talk on accessibility a couple years ago, and she said, technically, when you're pushing a stroller, you are disabled, because you're not able to move like you used to. Like you're walking with the stroller in the city on the sidewalk. If there's no ramp to that sidewalk, like you have to like awkwardly maneuver yourself and like pick up the stroller, and it's like you can't really do it. And then if you think about it, you don't have your hands anymore. So if you're going to carry something, you have to like find a place in the stroller to put it, or like hang it on the stroller, or hang it on your arms, or wear a backpack. Like you have to accommodate for you pushing the stroller. And then it's it was very interesting. She's like, yeah, you're disabled. And I was like, but you're walking, but you can't use two of your arms. And also you can even like extend that out to you also have another person to worry about who's unable to protect themselves. And that babies can be considered disabled because they are not able to really do anything. So on their own, at least. But these temporary disabilities can also go into recovering from surgery. Like even like wisdom teeth, like you can't like use a straw, and that's something that people use every day. I have one right now. To like having surgery on both of your knees and not being able to walk for like months to like a year. So it can go really far. And even COVID disables people. Like both of my roommates lost their sense of smell and taste. So, and they've even said like you take for granted what you can do until you can't do it anymore, even if it's temporary.
So I have a question about what's the difference between not be able to access certain sensory level versus being disabled of not having that sensory. So for example, the difference between someone who have an hearing impairment, is that the word, impairment?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Hearing impairment versus someone who's listening to music and can't hear anything else, right?
I guess, sorry.
Oh no, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, I guess you can argue that the person listening to music might be temporarily disabled because they are only able to hear what is like in their ear. But I don't know, like that might fall more into like the disabled category of like pushing the stroller, maybe. But I might just be saying that, I don't know.
I could also
that's a good question.
I think it's also like how much it impacts your ability to interact with the world. So if you have a persistent hearing impairment, you are always going to be like trying to find ways to navigate the world without hearing or with loss of hearing, versus if you have your headphones in, you are still going to miss a lot of things. You're going to miss people talking to you. You might not hear something that's in your way or that's coming, like, you know, there are other restrictions to what you're able to perceive, but it's not necessarily a persistent impact on your day-to-day life.
Because people can also like wave at you and you can take your headphones out. It's a temporary disability because you're disabled from hearing other things, but you're still hearing.
Gotcha.
And I'm thinking like another example of this could be like if you go to a concert, back when we could go to concerts, like like on your way home, like I remember like after every concert, it's always said, wow, I can't hear anything. And it could go another day or two. So it's kind of like some of these things are like, well, if you didn't go to the concert, you wouldn't have that. And it's like if you weren't listening to music so loud, you would be able to hear people around you. But there's like a fine line, I guess, in between those things.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Most often it's me going to a concert and lost my voice because I screamed the entire way. So
and then how hard is it to communicate with people afterwards? Because you're like,
that's right. That's right. Cool.
Yeah. So real quick, I want to show you this 4-minute clip from this video from this YouTuber, Molly Burke. She's blind, and I'll give you a quick background of like her blindness so you understand. So she, I forget what, like I think it's a disease that she has with her eyes. I forget exactly what it was or is, but she basically had poor vision her whole childhood and then went completely blind around like 12 or 13. And she could only, it's not complete darkness. Like she could see like color blobs around, just like floating by, but she's always been able to see the like lights and like reflections. So like she really likes glitter because she's like, it's the one thing I can see. So she really likes that kind of stuff. And she's also still really into fashion, and like she like dyes her hair different colors, and she has tattoos. Like she's really into visual stuff, just as a note on that. And she also has that the eye shaking. I forget what it's called already. I'm so sorry. It's just escaped my mind. But she talks about that in other videos as well. I definitely recommend checking out her channel. But I want to show this quick 4-minute clip of her walking through how she uses her iPhone.
If you have any of these products here at home, like the Apple Watch, the MacBook, the iPad, the iPhone, or an iPod, anything else, if you have that at home and you go into your settings, you'll find general, accessibility, and then something called voiceover. Don't turn voiceover on unless you've looked up how to turn it off. Although actually, I think now you can do it with Siri. So I think if you have Siri, you can actually say Siri turn on voiceover or Siri turn off voiceover, and it'll do it for you. So you can kind of like play around with it too at home and check out how you can do things. But I'll just give you a quick show. So of course this is the rose gold and white iPhone 6S. I love it. And so I just have the finger. That's like the best part. It's already talking. Okay, I got it. All right, so basically this is like my home page. I have all my apps and I just move my finger across the screen and it reads me what's under my finger. Now for example, if I want to go to my phone, I double tap on my screen and then this is when, let's go to recents. And then if I want to scroll up and down my recents, I put 3 fingers and I just flick. Oh, of course it's not gonna work now. Really? There we go. So it just moves and then I can leave Burke. That's my mom. And then yeah. So go to my messages. I need to check those. So yeah, it just goes through. So yeah, it's pretty simple. And then just go to the next page, go to the first page again. It's honestly such simple technology. You can change the voice, you can change the speed that it talks at. A lot of people find my phone, a lot of sighted people find my phone to be very fast. And when I'm, say, reading a text message or checking an email, they can't understand what it's saying. But in the blind community, I actually have a very slow voice because unfortunately I am not one of those super tech savvy blind people like a lot of them are. I'm like very basic. I know the bare basics of how to get around my technology and that's it. And now here is my iPad, and honestly basically the iPad is just the jumbo version of the iPhone. Obviously I have this cute little monogrammed case because I'm super basic, and then inside I just have my iPad, and honestly it's the exact same. I don't even have to bother showing you because it works the exact same as my iPhone does. I just move my finger around it and tap.
So yeah, that was the quick clip. And I want to point out, so after that, she talks about her Apple Watch and how she uses that, which is really cool. And she also talks about how all of her friends are like, you text me back faster than my people who can see. Like my friends who can see, which I think is kind of funny because I'm like, oh, maybe Molly will take a minute to get back to me because she's blind and she has to use these accommodations, but she's like, she'll respond super fast. But I also want to point out how, like, even though she can't see, she still appreciates like designs around things and like the visual aesthetics of things, which ties into how like a lot of people worry that if something is designed accessibly, it is going to look ugly or not exciting. But like this video is from like 5 years ago, so the tech has also been updated. But like just in that 5-year journey of just her life, she has so many videos on how like she does her own makeup and stuff like that. So it just goes to show that even though she may not be able to see and appreciate like personally visual aesthetics, it is still valued even if they can't see it. So which Kim will dive more into about how we can use all of this information going forward, also keeping in mind that it doesn't have to be like ugly, and our designs don't have to be ugly, and our research doesn't have to be like I guess ugly or boring to accommodate everyone.
If you have any of these products here at home.
Okay, cool.
There we go. yeah, I think it was something that I would love to dive more into is understanding how people use assistive technologies. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's just super interesting to see videos like Molly Burke just like sharing how she navigates the world. It's just
for
really
sure.
interesting.
And when voice come on, like her face just focus,
Mhm.
right? She's just listening in for cues, which is fascinating to me.
It's a totally different way of like thinking and like,
Navigating.
interacting.
Yeah.
This is just like a sidebar. A couple years ago, I had a meeting and like we had a guest speaker come in to like help us with something, and we didn't know until our guest speaker arrived that she was blind, and she used like a walking stick, and she had like her own computer with like a braille keyboard and all this stuff, and we were like completely unprepared for the fact that like we had somebody who was blind who was going to come and do a presentation for us. And she was like, I mean, first of all, she knew her stuff. She was like 100% the right person to do what she was doing and knew everything she was talking about. And she wasn't talking about being blind. She was talking about her like area of focus at the university. I don't remember what it was. But it was just, we were so surprised and like had to check our own biases because didn't expect her to be capable of doing everything that she did. And when she was trying to leave, we're like, oh, do you need us to call you a cab? Like, do you need us to help you find where you're going? She's like, oh no, I'll walk the 20 minutes across campus. I know the path, or like my phone will tell me where to go. And it was just completely shocking to us to think about like, and to really challenge ourselves to like be like, we weren't the ones who needed to provide her a solution. This is her life. She knows how to navigate the world. Like she can do it on her own. And I think we need, like, I definitely need more lessons in just like learning from people who already know how to deal with their stuff, who already know how to navigate the world and just understand how they navigate the world a little bit better.
I will add, Molly has a video too on how she navigates life because she actually lives alone with her guide dog. And I think her mom, like she has like a room in her apartment for her mom when she does live with her for a little bit, but she like, her guide dog, like she trains them. She's like, we're going to Starbucks, and they just know where to go. And it's really interesting how the misunderstandings of how people can like actually do, like just because they're disabled doesn't mean they're not able to take care of themselves.
100%. Yeah, awesome. It's cool. So now that we've kind of like talked a little bit more about like different types of disabilities, I wanted to ask again, like, how are we going to include accessibility practices in our research and design? And I'll get into like some techniques afterwards, but I would just love to hear if any of you are inspired by what we've learned so far to think about new ways we can be more accessible. Any thoughts? Any ideas?
Yeah, I'm not fully sure how the iOS screen reader works, but I know that's something that you and I, Kim, are already thinking about with UG, is just making sure that a screen reader on desktop is able to read all the forms that we put in, you know, keeping text outside of a field, or at least having it move up there when that field is active. So one very small way.
That's a very important way, though. It's huge.
Yeah, I also think just because we think that they're more able than we thought, I think it's still, you've inspired me so far to think about, okay, but we need to make their life easier. So I think for me, I would want to start earlier than when going into design. So maybe in research, in UX research, to include at least, 10% or 20%, well, 1 in 7. So 1 in 7% of different able types, right? Either vision or hearing, or even modal skills. I think, yeah, that will be something that I would think about.
Yeah, that's really, really awesome, which is exactly what our next slide is about, actually. About research.
Did not practice this.
No, totally not. So one thing, we can definitely include people with disabilities in our research. And so both in the types of research that we conduct, and also in how we are sourcing people. So when we're thinking about the types of research that we're conducting, obviously like the best start is in interviews, getting people's like lived experiences and understanding them. Something that helps with a whole range of disabilities is providing questions in advance. This goes for people with visual impairments, with auditory impairments, as well as people with cognitive impairments. So, or disabilities or disorders. Like if you have a hard time focusing, seeing a list of questions can help you focus. If you have memory loss issues, again, seeing the list of questions can help you focus and remember. And it also reduces like anxiety about forgetting things or missing things, which if you have those types of disabilities is common to have that kind of anxiety. So I know we try to do a lot of very conversational interviews, which is really important, but we also should provide base questions in advance just to help people. This is something that like I'm guilty of not doing, but it's something that as we were like conducting our research, it was coming up and we were like, okay, this is something we could start doing. With usability tests, that's another huge part where we can see how people would actually interact with our designs, if it's an app or a website, even if it's like an email or something, just seeing how people interact with it and what they use to navigate it. If they're able to navigate it with the system that we've already built, or if they have to use additional like assistance to get through it. And then when it comes to like card sorting and tree testing, this is a good place to challenge ourselves on how we organize information, and what we might think is logical for us may not be logical for all types of users. And so this goes beyond disability even, is of just like making sure we're accounting for different ways and paths of thinking and how people associate differently. So just to challenge ourselves to make sure that we are including a diverse group of people, and diversity includes disabilities and it includes many different walks of life and everything in there. So really just a challenge to us to like challenge ourselves within the collective and with others that we work with to make sure that we're advocating for diverse user groups in our user testing, in our user research and all that. One of the kind of good things is like we've been doing a lot of audits recently. And so if you audit and look at heuristics actually accounts for a significant number of disabilities. If you make things that are accessible and controllable and like matches real world language and things like that, it naturally falls into the standardized guidelines for accessibility, which is amazing. We love to use tools that help us do what we're already doing, but it finds out that it covers multiple parts. So really, really great and important to use. When it comes to if we're ever researching in person again, instead of remotely, it's important to let people use their own devices. So somebody who has a severe mobile disorder or mobile disability or visual disabilities may have devices. They already have the apps that they're installed on their own devices. They already have their screen readers and whatever other like controllers that they might need to navigate. And that's going to be much easier for them to do on their own devices that they're comfortable with rather than our provided device where we've preloaded an app or something. So kind of have to rethink our process. Remotely, this might mean instead of us screen sharing something for another person to walk through, it may be sending them a link so that they can access it on their own device and navigate it on their own device rather than us trying to like show it to them, which may or may not work. So kind of challenges some of the tools that we're currently using. Yeah, that was kind of an interesting one. I didn't really expect because I was like, oh, there's like screen readers on your iPhone already and things like that, but it
and
may
is
not
there
be
any special setup that we have to account for if let's say, besides sending them a link?
It may be that they need to download something on their own phone or on their own device. So if we have like, I know, let's see, Adobe XD and Figma, and I think Axure, a couple of the design programs, design softwares have like an external piece of software that allows you to download and interact with a prototype. And so it may be that we have to send information like that in advance so that people can like have it on their own device, which, you know, may be a problem with some of our privacy concerns for our clients, but that's something we can navigate and cross that bridge when we get there. But yeah, that's one of the things to consider. If we aren't able to allow them to do that, it's just another reason to confirm their needs before you start testing, to make sure that we understand what they need. And if we can't get it to their device, we can figure out how to make our device more accessible to their specific needs. Rather than assuming that we know the solution, but just asking, okay, what would make this work for you, or what would enable you to actually be able to use our prototype? So a lot of this is, we're giving a lot of general information, and all of this is only good until you talk to an individual person and understand, like, this is kind of the, like, give yourself enough knowledge to understand the basics, and then as we get more comfortable with people, we can talk to them and get to understand their specific needs and how to address them. And then something else that I thought was going to be a little bit more challenging when it comes to our research part is sourcing the right testers. And so I was looking through a couple of different sources. I'm still going to do some more research on this because there are local organizations, like there's a national like organization for blindness in the US, and they have local chapters, and apparently you can reach out to some of the local chapters and ask if they have anybody who would be willing to test. So I'm sure there's other organizations for other types of abilities that are out there. I just want to verify before I provide sources that like they're okay with us contacting them, or that like there's other resources we can try to find to contact people directly to help ask them to test. But something I found in search of that is there is a organization called the Ally Project. And if you use #Ally, which is A11Y, you will find other people who are following that hashtag who are interested in accessibility, both designers who are able-bodied who are interested in accessibility, and people who require more accessibility in the web. So that is a good source for us to use when we are trying to source on our own rather than going through like a specific agency or something. So yeah, we're trying to find us some more resources to do all the things that we're talking about. And then as we get into design, there's a whole ton of stuff. I wanted to be really tactical and provide us with specific techniques and tools that we can all use starting like today. So this is non-exhaustive. I'm sure we will learn more, but these are some things that we can start incorporating over time. So for one thing, talking about research, like we want to start incorporating accessibility at every stage, so that by the time we get to developers, which is usually where accessibility drops off, if we've already advocated for accessibility from everything from research to the actual design phase, presenting to the client, and then getting it to developers, we'll hopefully have already had the hard conversations with our clients about why they need to include it. And it's almost silly to undo the work that we've done for the developers to like not do the things that we told them to do. So the more we include it from the beginning, the more we can have it show up in the final designs, which is ultimately our goal. And specifically because that will help us avoid lawsuits. So which want to endorse for everybody. So if you want to like get into the nitty gritty of like what the specific requirements and then also guidelines are, there is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I think this is legal in the US. I'm not sure how far it extends, but it is generally a good recommendation, even no matter where you are in the world, with standards of like what the legal requirements is and then like what's actually even better. It's kind of a slog to read through. It is really, really technical. So we have other resources too, if you don't want to.
Maybe a goal would be making this more accessible.
Yes, absolutely. More easily understood and usable.
Internal project.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah, which is be awesome. Also, again, like when we consider heuristics will account for a lot of these because we've already including things about like flow and layout and like making things are minimal, all that type of stuff that comes into heuristics really applies to accessibility guidelines. Another fun thing that we do, and I do this when I audit websites, is the left-hand test, which is where you just put your finger on the tab button and see how you navigate a website if you're just pressing tab. Does it make sense, the order that your cursor ends up going in? Are you able to click on every link eventually? Can you navigate all the way through? This is important because it replicates what a lot of users who use like a single click controller have to do. Or even like users that are blind, they may only have one controller that they're actually using to click through. So making sure that you can actually access things easily and it flows in a logical order, like you're not jumping all over the page every time you hit tab. So that's like a really fun and quick thing that we can do actually. And focusing on this will help us increase just how people are able to navigate. This is often a very specific conversation with developers to make sure that they know that everything is lined up in the correct order. And then another thing that this isn't always going to impact what we're doing, but if you are ever working on like a video-based app or a visual app, making sure that there's closed captioning for deaf users, it's specifically will like help deaf users, but it also will, as a benefit, assist people who are non-native language speakers, anyone who has like cognitive disabilities or disorders, a whole slew of other things. If you're in a space where you can't listen to the audio, but you still want to watch it. And typically the best practice for that is to have it in one consistent part on the screen. There's a lot of fun TikToks where they have like the words bouncing all over, and that's actually can be very distracting and harder to follow.
Don't be Clubhouse. Yes.
Don't be Clubhouse. Clubhouse is a textbook example of all the things they're doing wrong with accessibility. I linked an article at the back of this in our bonus resources about how I don't know how much y'all know about Clubhouse, so I don't know how deep I should go into it.
Give a one sentence.
Yeah. So, I mean, Clubhouse is a social media app that is based on just like immediate video chats. So you'd like come into a video chat immediately, which on the surface would be really, really good for deaf or hard of hearing users who often read lips or sign, or like they require a visual in order to communicate. However, there's no closed captioning whatsoever. So it's completely inaccessible to them to jump into an auditory-based app. They can't use it. Also, Clubhouse is not optimized for screen readers. So people who have visual impairments, even if they could listen and talk, can't actually get into the app because their screen reader won't pick up anything and won't direct them through it. That is a problem of they have a really small development team and they're a startup and they're growing really fast, and nobody thought at any point to consider accessibility as they were designing. And now they have an exploding app that a bunch of disabled users are like, I will never use you even if you become available, because this is infuriating. So let's not follow their example. Accessibility will always gain us users. It will never cost us users. So something to think about. Cool. Specifically, when we look at design, font and typography can really make or break the experience for people. So making sure that font size is large enough. There's no clear guidelines on this, but usually 16 pixels is for body text is as small as you really want to go. And then all web pages, you should be able to zoom up to 200% without additional assistive technology. So something that I read that we should be doing is when we're testing our designs, we should zoom in and see where things break and overlap and get weird as you zoom in on a web page, just to see what happens, so that we know that that is how many people will experience the website if they have visual impairments. So something to remind our developers that they need to be able to support zooming in that far. And that's actually a legal requirement. So if they don't do that, they can get sued. For people who have dyslexia, they often have issues identifying different letters. And so if you use fonts where the letters are too symmetrical, it's really hard to read. So the best advice that I've seen has been to use fonts where each letter is unique and distinct. That way they can identify each letter. Supposedly sans serif fonts are better for this, but there's a mixed bag. I've seen a whole bunch of different lists of fonts, so I don't have the best recommendation on which ones to use yet, so I'll keep looking into that for us. But just something to consider as we're writing. Also, more space between letters typically helps dyslexia as well. And a very consistent thing that's going to show up throughout how we design is having a really clear text hierarchy. So using the tools that we already have, the design tools we already have, we should be developing a typography system from header to body all the way down to body text, because that helps with readability. It helps with focus, helps with readability, and it helps users navigate the pages a lot faster and easier. So it's good for screen readers, it's good for people who have issues focusing, it's good all around. So text hierarchy is gold. Cool. So we talked a little bit about this already, making things screen reader friendly. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do this. One is the form field example, which I talked about to Mark a lot. So we're doing it in our current project. This is like my biggest, probably something I'm becoming a little notorious for. If you have a form field label within the actual form field, screen readers usually cannot pick it up. This is typically because developers didn't code the label properly because it's like within the form field. So somebody who needs a screen reader will never be able to see what they're entering into the form. So even if there's fun, more trendy ways to do it, it is important to keep the field label outside of the form field so that they can actually use it and it can actually
Did
be
not
accessible.
know that. That is a learning. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it frustrates me because I see it in like material design and a whole bunch of other design practices where the field label stays in the form and then it disappears when you start typing because it looks clean, but it's actually completely inaccessible to the majority of people. 1 in 7 to kind of remind people. Also, it's important to include like captions or alternative text. Alternative text typically comes in the code. Yeah, this is some examples of that. So on the left here, this is an example of if you looked at the code for this page, this image would be tagged with the alt text that says David Ortiz of the Boston Red Sox is batting from home plate at Fenway Park. A specific description of exactly what's happening. There's not a description of there's thousands of people behind him and there's a green grandstand and like not overly descriptive, but just a clear, quick description. This is something to remind developers to do. In the case that you're designing something like we're doing, Mark, for Uncommon Good, where users are entering their own pictures, that actually requires that we put a real caption there instead, because we can't rely on development to come back and double check that there's alt text on every single thing. And so we're gonna have to put clear form fields where the user is gonna be required to enter a caption. A fun example I had of this is Zingerman's Bakehouse, which is a local business in Ann Arbor, super awesome. And I noticed a few months ago that they started in their Instagram posts, in addition to their fun caption, they would include an actual image description at the bottom of each post, which makes it more accessible for people who have visual impairments to actually still be able to engage with Instagram, which is a super visually based platform. So wanted to show that it can be a fun way of like, you can include it in fun ways. Yeah, something I hadn't thought of before, to be honest. And it's just something really simple that makes it more people able to engage. So I want to think of these types of things as we were moving forward. Again, text hierarchy is really great for screen readers. It's great for everyone. Just use great text hierarchy everywhere, always. Pop-ups, this is going to be a harder conversation with our clients, but pop-ups and ads are super, super disruptive. If you're scrolling down a page and a pop-up randomly appears on your website, that forces the screen reader to reload the page and scroll back up to the top. So that means that anybody who is relying on a screen reader is going to get really frustrated and leave. They're just going to stop because there are other websites that do the same thing without the ads. They're just going to find one that doesn't have disruptive ads popping up.
Oh, I want to add to that real quick. And that applies also to not just screen readers, like the pop-up being disruptive. It can also impact people with ADHD or anxiety or even OCD or anything where it would be disruptive and actually like impact their like train of thought or their focus or their flow. And that can also be startling at times, and that's not fun.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
So my dislike of pop-ups are just justified.
So justified. So justified. If it annoys us and we feel relatively able-bodied to be able to deal with it, imagine if you don't have as many resources to like close it or install ad block or whatever. It's just so irritating. And then the other thing we can do is similar to the left-hand test, making sure that we're optimizing any user flow. So if we make really clean, awesome user flows where we're directing the user to the main point of what they're supposed to be doing and being really action focused, we are just making everybody's life easier, from the most able-bodied person to the person who requires a screen reader to get through it all. So that's all good things. Colors are another big thing. There's a lot of different ways to approach color accessibility. The main thing is that I want to point out is that color should be redundant to function. So anything that a color like color shouldn't be adding an actual function. Everything should be clear and should be functional, and the color should just be like add-on sparkles. So that means like if you have selected a button, there needs to be an indicator beyond a color change, because not everyone can see color change. And if you're using a screen reader, your screen reader can't see the color change. So we need to make sure that we're not relying on colors to tell users what to do, and that there's some other indicator there. Usually the best way to do this is through like including a pattern or an outline to indicate that something has been selected or deselected or highlighted or for whatever reason. Shadows are also really hard to see, so just relying on a shadow pop-up if you're like hovering over something is not going to really communicate to a lot of people. A wide range of visual impairments can't see shadows, so consider that in our design. And then there's some notes on like achieving a color contrast. There's a very specific color contrast you have to achieve for like legal requirements. And so using tools like the plugin that Mark just mentioned on Figma will help us achieve that more easily, because it's a color contrast of costs across hue and brightness and all sorts of things that I don't get because I'm a UX designer, but it's still important. So I rely on tools to do that.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Can I add? I also want to point out, I forget the exact fact, but I know like street signs are all green with white text and it's bolded. Apparently white and green is like the clearest color contrast, I guess, in terms of reading. And just as a fun fact for you all. And also if you are doing this contrast, like really, really black and really, really white, like white text on black is not actually accessible. That's if you notice with dark mode, things are like a charcoal gray or like have a blue tint to it. And the white, if you put that teardropper on it, is not always exact white. It's like a little gray or like a cream. Mm-hmm. Just as a fun fact.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, because when I was looking at this, I used a couple of different contrast checkers that help you test different color blindness. And interestingly, a lot of the times if it's the same like vibrancy, so if it's like a stark white or a stark black, if they're the same like vibrancy of that color, it becomes monotone, and it becomes like both colors become the same in a certain types of color blindness. So you still miss out on, even though it might appear that you've got like a really stark contrast, it's a little bit deeper than that because eyes are complicated. So so I've got a couple of resources linked in here in the later slides of different plugins that we can use to model color blindness. But it's also why we shouldn't be relying just on color to tell people what to do. It also, too many colors can really overload the user's ability to focus. And this impacts everybody. So especially people with cognitive disorders and disabilities. So making sure that we're using just the right amount and not too much and not going too overboard, and reining in our clients sometimes, like we're having to do on Uncommon Good, for example, of making sure that there's not too many colors. Okay, and then this is great. So we're at reducing cognitive load, which is something that we learn early on in UX anyways. Turns out it's great for accessibility, and it's something that hopefully we're already doing. So as I've mentioned, typography is huge, and having text hierarchy, look at that, it shows up again. So having headings and subheadings and lists helps people read faster, helps them scan it. If they have a hard time focusing, this will help with that. It also especially helps people who are using screen readers to have less blocks of text to go through, and it's easier for them to jump really quickly. Just in terms of how people focus, 70 to 80 characters per line is probably the max that you want to achieve. Making sure there's clear hierarchy with buttons, so not having 1,000 different types of buttons who do different things, but trying to make sure that it's clear what the main call to action is, and having a limited number of tertiary buttons. Again, using consistency with our colors, and then white space is super helpful too to help people focus. This is going to help people with cognitive and visual impairments, as well as the actual assistive technology to avoid getting distracted. And in general, just will help people's ability to like skim the data and actually retain whatever we put out there. So instead of putting everything out there, just put what's necessary. Yeah. Okay. And then I kind of want to talk a little bit about different types of assistive technology. So that's all the different things, different ways that we can design, and these are what we're kind of designing for. So there are screen or text readers. Some of them are already on your phone for accessibility, but there's also additional apps like JAWS and VoiceOver that users can install on their devices to help them navigate the web. Typically used by people with visual and cognitive disabilities. There's also speech input software. So that way they can, if you're not able to see what you're doing, you can dictate and it will be picked up and help them either navigate by telling like functions. This is also important for people who have limited motor functions, so who might have to be able to use like their voice to navigate technology. So again, super important. And then there's some more stuff on the next slide. Screen magnification software. So your screen should be able to magnify to 200%, but then there's additional software to go even farther for people who truly have to zoom in to zoom in their displays. And this is for anything from an actual web page to like your desktop, just background. And then something that I thought was super cool and I would love to get more into is like there's alternative input devices. So there's things like, there's like so much technology in this space that it's so freaking cool. I like wrote a list out for myself. There's single switch access where it's like a single button that has a menu that pops up on their screen where as they hit the button, it like will move through. And it can be used with just your hand. People have used it with their like completely paralyzed will use it with their cheek, where they put it under their head and they navigate through the web and their apps with a single click just from their head. Stephen Hawking used one. He had it on his cheek, and so he would like turn his head and like click it, and that helped him navigate everything from navigating his technology to controlling his device that would speak for him. It's really cool. There's sip and puff switches where it's in their mouth and they use their breath to control the device, and it again clicks through the website and helps them navigate. People can play video games that way. People can type up essays that way. It's really cool. And there's also like eye tracking technology. So I saw a really cool example of an eye tracker that allows people to play video games where they can play Minecraft just using their eyes. And so they're like, to blink to click, and it like helps them navigate like a different submenu to help them engage. And so there's so many really cool devices to help people who have just such a wide range of disability still engage with the world and like really engage with technology that I don't want to disclude them from our.
I would love to see a video of someone actually playing video games with their eyes tracking. That sounds fascinating.
I have a video linked, a Twitter clip. It's so cool.
Sorry. Okay. I was just came to mind. I've actually done something similar. It's called neurofeedback. They hook up sensors to your head. They just like use like jelly and just put it on, and you can either like watch a movie or you don't really control a video game, but like it's been years since I've done it, but like the brain waves kind of impact, like go through the sensor, and it can pick up if you're focusing or if you're like focusing too hard or if you're stressed. So I remember watching Milo and Otis, and it would just like pause randomly. And then I'd be like, why? And then I learned I wasn't paying attention, or I was playing this race car game where if I was thinking too much on like making it win or like wanting to win, or thinking too much on like just something else, it would just stop. Like, and like you would pay attention to the color of the exhaust of the car. So it's amazing what is possible with this technology.
Mm-hmm. It's so cool. And I saw a video on LinkedIn about how people with disabilities are the most likely to adopt like the web and technology because they can't move through the physical world as easily, but the online world doesn't require limbs. And so all these two different devices that we should be supporting can help them navigate the world and like participate more fully and like in community and in the world. And so something I want to keep supporting because I just think it's super cool, and there's just a whole bunch of cool options there. And also when I think about, there's a few people in our collective who are interested in doing design within healthcare. And so you're going to run into assistive technologies in healthcare, like for sure, 100%. So it's something to consider pretty important as we move forward. So that's most of my spiel. Hopefully we covered a lot of like tactical things as well as some background, but would love to learn what you guys would like to learn more about, so we can plan potentially some like future sessions on topics that we want to dive a little bit deeper into.
Yeah, and Irfan already shared another resource, both Irfan and Mark, on our Slack. So one is the color contrast plugin for Figma extension, A11Y, for anyone who's looking into this. And then Irfan shared getstark.co. Have you used that before, Irfan?
Sadly, I cannot even log in. I mean, I cannot access to that website because it's blocked on in my country though. I don't know why.
Oh.
So yeah, it's quite interesting when you guys talk about accessibility. So in Malaysia, it's not really not saying practice to do that, because in line of my works, normally what I like what do you call it, when I learn, they just told me that thinking of the logical think of it, how possible on each button or user flow is it exact to just use a common sense. But I didn't know about this kind of knowledge before about in terms of this UX. So it's a good stuff that what I learned from here. So thanks so much for you guys. Yeah,
awesome. There was something I didn't include it, but when I was doing research on the World Health Organization, they provided a lot of these numbers and stats and stuff, and disability is growing in the world, first of all, but it's also more common in developing countries, third and second world countries, because of access to healthcare. And so we're very privileged in the US to have access to like accessible technologies and assistive technologies to help people navigate, but in other parts of the world, there's extremely limited access to it. And it's also not regulated in the way that it is in the US. Like in the US, there are mandated standards we have to hit for our web designs. That doesn't exist everywhere. So especially as our collective grows and our internationalness, would love to kind of make this a standard for us, no matter whether it's legally required or not, because that way we're increasing access worldwide. So just want to like shamelessly plug that.
Yeah, for sure. I know Shira in the Philippines and Tiep in Vietnam weren't able to join today, but we post the recording and hopefully they can jump in. I see Liz on the call. Elizabeth, good to see you.
Welcome. Is there anything that we want to like touch on more or go more in depth on when it comes to accessibility?
Yeah, I'd like to know more about the like adaptive technologies you mentioned, like the like sip and puff and eye tracking. So I was like loosely aware of those to begin with, but I'm not aware of like the full extent their capabilities. And also super quick, I think Stark has the same function as Ally and then more. So that might be a better plugin for Figma. I'll have to check Stark out though, to be sure.
Yeah, I'll have to look into it. Cool. So we want to learn more about assistive technologies, which is cool. I went down a rabbit hole and I was like, this does not fit for the amount of time we have today, but I would love to go more in depth.
I also am very interested in when we should start using these plugins. Like, it's great that we install them, let's say use for Figma or use in our research, but practically, when is a good time to do that, right? Is it when we have our first draft of design, or when we're doing components? What is it, right?
That's a good question. I definitely think we should be doing it, and I'm guilty of not doing this, I'll name that, of trying to be as accessible as we can with contrast, even when we're doing low fidelity or mid fidelity wireframes. That way we know that we've covered it in the, if we're using grayscale, making sure that we've hit those contrast requirements, because we don't know, we could be handing it off to a developer who has challenges seeing.
That's true. And that's also I'm at it, like I want to emphasize the point of like it's important for your mid-fi wireframes to be accessible, obviously, and then like a hi-fi usability test is like will also let you know like what wasn't really accessible in black and white versus color, and then you might need to go back into your mid-fi to see like if someone who really can't see color, because that's most likely how they're going to see your product anyway, how can you make that better?
That's a super good point.
And also it's interesting, the UX versus UI, right? Ofan is getting gated by VPN. Your own doing, man. Your own doing. But I'm very curious, right? UX wireframe is often black and white, so I would argue that is higher contrast. But how can we think about, kind of the left hand mode of navigation or the tab type navigation, or text hierarchy, but then prepare it for our UI counterparts so that when we're ready to apply colors and fonts and things like that, it's an added bonus. Like, how do we build from one discipline to another?
Oh, it's a really good one. I'm gonna write that down because I think we could do an entire other session to designing our practice to inform that.
Agreed.
It also makes me wonder about like, often when we prototype, we only have limited options that are available. And so it makes me wonder if like, is InVision accessible to somebody who's just tapping through? I don't know that it is. And some of the other like prototyping tools, I was like, I have never considered if you can navigate, how you could navigate a prototype without like a mouse and multiple fingers available. So
sure. And I will be the first to say that in the past, I've been a bit, I want my design and my work to be much more accessible, but whenever I go to the accessibility guidelines, like that website, I get so overwhelmed because there's just so much information. And so even if, I don't know if there's a way that we can help organize those information by use case, almost.
That's, so actually, where is it? I have a resource that I've linked on the slide, but I'll also just put it in the chat so you guys can take a peek. There's this website called the Ally Project, and it's a community sourced project for making the website or making web more accessible. And it's called Ally because between A and Y, there are 11 letters in the word accessibility. So it's A11Y. And so they've actually got on their website a checklist where they've done some work in making the web accessibility guidelines more understandable. So you can go a little bit easier, I think, to read into it. And it's one thing, I haven't used it yet, but I'm going to try to use it and see if it works. And if it's still too complex, I think that's a project we should take on as a collective, or I might just do it myself. Interesting.
For sure. Collective sponsor. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm in for it.
Yeah. Are there any other questions or any other things we want to like dive deeper into? It's okay. We can have a rolling conversation on this. Danni, if you want to share the other sides about just like additional research and resources to share. We've got a ton of things to share them.
Oh, sorry, my video's off. Yeah, we have these resources as well as these, and then links to all of the video that we shared and the facts and stuff like that, like there are references and then things that are going on right now.
We'll share
so
this
many
out.
things.
And so you can all go through the links if you want to. We've also, on one of the pages, we had like a list of tools that we're using. So I think we actually had the Figma, the Ally color contrast thing listed, but I want to get a list of a few more plugins and stuff. I've got a plugin that changes the color contrast on your web page to mimic different types of color blindness on any web page. So you can see like kind of what's happening. And I've used other things that will just pull the entire palette out, which has multiple uses in UI, but is also good for testing contrast. So we'll share out and hopefully grow this list. I want this to be like a growing list of resources for us as we find new tools that helps make our work easier and accessible. So
maybe we should, because on our site, I think we're growing the resource hub to help people. We should make a section about accessibilities and just include this on there.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Yeah, let's do it. And hopefully maybe it can help other designers, researchers as well. Why not?
Yeah, I think that would be great. Danny and I can help work on getting that information together for you. So you can just post it up.
Yes. Thank you. This has been great. Thanks so much for putting this together and for sharing your passion. It really shows.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cue the thank you slide.
Okay, exactly.
I'm going to pause the recording now and then we can check in with each other.